Hello and welcome to Sideline Story, your destination for sports news, analysis and discussions. I'm Yang Guang. This week we take a look at the comeback of tennis legend Venus Williams and the longevity of professional athletes in today's sports. For this chat, I'm joined here with my fantastic co-hosts Tian Yu and Brandon Yates. Alright, Venus Williams has come out of retirement in tennis and made a winning return. The 45-year-old American teamed up with her compatriot Hailey Baptiste to compete at Washington Open women's doubles and won in her first match back. The seven-time Grand Slam singles champion hadn't played a single competitive match in 16 months. Tian Yu, what do you make of Venus Williams' return to tennis? Was it a strategic play to, extend her legacy in tennis, or a booster for her own, sportswear brand 11 or something else?
Well, yeah, I think it's amazing. Her comeback at 45 is there's no words to describe it, because after being away for tennis after 16 months, she's just stepped back and on the court and still looks so athletic and powerful. And when she crushed her opponent in the first round of the Washington Open, it showed that age hasn't really showed her down. And that kind of energy and skill for such a long break is really impressive. And honestly, I don't see her return as a strategic move to promote her brand or, build momentum in the traditional sense. Because, from what Venus has said herself, it feels like she's coming back mainly because she loves the sport, she loves the game, she enjoys the competition and the beauty of tennis itself. And also considering the fact that she's already made plenty of money out of her, successful career, I don't think money is the main drive behind her return. And plus, she has always been, a little bit unconventional in her career choices, and her return now kind of fixed that pattern. And she even mentioned that she was hitting the ball well and felt, comfortable on hard courts, which is her favorite surface. So it seems like it's a genuine passion thing, but not, just a business or legacy play. So she's focused now having fun and not, putting on too much pressure on herself. Winning is great, but more than anything, she wants to get the best out of herself and just enjoy the moment.
Brandon, do you think she can still make splash in WTA Tour?
Look, I don't think she will exactly make a splash. I think, she's obviously a very incredibly highly experienced athlete, and incredibly successful one too. Obviously over the years, I guess Serena Williams has kind of taken the baton of being, the more successful one of the sisters, and will probably go down as the greatest female tennis player of all time. And she's also, just in terms of her accomplishments, if we take gender away from the conversation, she's also in the list of the greatest all-time tennis players. On the other hand, Venus Williams also played a huge role in that. Her kind of ascension to the top of women's tennis kind of came before Serena Williams, and she also made a big splash early on in her career and was very successful early on. Look, I think the comeback is definitely not financially motivated. I think there's kind of a two birds with one stone element to it, where, I think there is probably, something in her mind that's telling her that she can continue to compete at this level, and she probably feels like she has a little bit more to give and just isn't ready to put the racket down permanently. And I think she probably wanted to show herself and the world that even after this long-term layoff, and even at her age, that she can still be, a high-performing athlete. And I'm sure there is an element of it where she does want to promote, her brand 11. I think that is something that is kind of in the back of her mind. And I'm sure her management team have also said, look, if you are wanting to return to tennis, it is good for you to be, active on the WTA, just to be, a relevant athlete while, still trying to promote this brand, which I think is relatively important. But that being said, I think even if she was retired and not playing anymore, she still is quite a high profile celebrity and a pretty relevant voice and personality in the sporting world. So I don't think her being an active player or a retired player would actually affect her brand too much. From the comments that I've, read about her, what she said about her return, I tend to believe her. I don't think there's any hidden agenda when it comes to the reasoning for her return. I genuinely think that, there are some people out there, which is nice to hear. They do, even though they are earning, crazy amounts of money and, seemingly have this, lavish and extraordinary lifestyle. Some of them really do enjoy the sport that they play.
Yeah.
And I think Venus Williams is one of those athletes. I think I mean, she looks like she's having a great time out there. She doesn't seem to be putting any pressure on herself. From her perspective, it's kind of win-win-win. And I also think that, she's also been a big voice in the women's game in terms of like keeping, the spotlight on women's tennis and, fighting for equality in terms of, how female athletes get treated, particularly in tennis, in terms of, getting as much, attention and sort of financial backing and that sort of thing compared to the male players. So I'm sure there's also kind of a spokesperson element to her still being in the game. It's not like an embarrassing thing. She doesn't look like she's out there, trying to, compete like a 20-year-old. I'm sure she's very aware of her limitations and, she's adapted her game to deal with, the inevitable creeping of age and of nature. And I think she's just genuinely out there having a good time, just enjoying the final years of her career and just, trying to remain relevant, which I think she's doing in a classy way.
Right. Well, when Venus Williams was asked why she would return to tennis, she said, why not?
Yeah.
She admitted
Exactly.
tennis is now drive-driven, but also hinted at unfinished business. Here, I doubt the unfinished business refers to any tournament titles, because I don't know if she needs more trophies after an already trophy-laden career. There might be some elements involved with promotion of her own sportswear brand 11, but it must be more than that. I prefer to believe that she just misses the time on the court, and a return is so intriguing that she cannot resist it. But I think she's got the confidence to go on playing tennis. Otherwise, she wouldn't even consider this option. So this leads to our next question, because in my old impression, someone who is past 35 is not appropriate to play competitive, not only tennis, but sports anymore. Someone who is past 30 would be on his or her downhill slope already. But in today's sports landscape, there are more and more aged stars that play way longer than expected and still keep, competitive form in their sports. Like Cristiano Ronaldo is 40, LeBron James is 40, Luka Modric 39, Lionel Messi 38, Novak Djokovic 38. The list goes on and on. It's not just one or two names. It's a very common phenomenon now that players play beyond their, 30 or 35, 38, and they still shine in their own sports.
Yeah.
So I guess it seems like I need to update my knowledge about how old athletes can play in, sports, especially those physically demanding sports like football or basketball. So Tianyu, do you believe 40 is the new 30 in sports? And what's the secret of this common longevity in professional sports nowadays?
Yeah, I guess I would say so. I think we need to raise the ceiling of, professional sports players' career span now, because, when you look at guys like Venus Williams still playing at 45, Cristiano Ronaldo, who's still scoring goals for Portugal, Luka Modric, running tirelessly like he's 25, and also LeBron James, becoming the leading NBA scorer. These players, they are top level performances that not too long ago we wouldn't expect from athletes at their age. So what's changed? A lot of it comes down to how modern training, medicine, and recovery methods have evolved. Because athletes today aren't just training harder; they're actually training smarter. They focus a lot more on strength and mobility, which keeps their bodies durable. And they kind of recover better too, because things like better sleep routines, active recovery workouts, and using technologies like cryotherapy or even brain stimulating tools just helps speed up healing process. Nutrition is also very important too, as the athletes are now equipped with anti-inflammatory diets,
Right.
Protein-rich foods, and all kinds of supplements to protect their junctures and muscles. Let's not forget about the mental side of things, because a lot of these older athletes, they have incredible discipline and resilience, so they know how to manage their workload, avoid burnout, and even adjust how they play as they age. I would say it's both science, smart planning, and also serious dedication from these players that have allowed more and more athletes to extend their careers and extend their primes way longer than before.
Right. Well, here's what proves my impression of the longevity of professional athletes. The New York Times cited data from sports consultancy 21st Group in 2022, which showed that playing time for players over the age of 32 in the UEFA Champions League has increased year by year that season, and that year, players aged 34 and above accumulated more total playing time in Europe's top 5 leagues than in any other season on record. This data also showed that among the world's top 150 players, the number of athletes over age 30 has doubled compared to the past decade. Everything indicates 30 now is no longer a point where players would have declines.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, scientific approaches have really helped the players extend their career. So Brandon, do you agree that now 40 is the new 30 in sports? And if yes, what has led to this?
I would say so. And I think, it's a combination of things that we've already touched on, but I think there's a couple of other things that we haven't mentioned. So, of course, I think, as football fans, Cristiano Ronaldo is probably the best example that we can look at. So, for example, someone like him, of course, sports science and modern medicine and just the evolution and knowledge that we now have in sports science has made a huge difference for him. So we've already mentioned some of his, sort of training regimens that, particularly at this age now, that are able to sort of elongate his career. So, cryotherapy, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, underwater treadmill sessions, soft tissue treatment, of course, elite nutrition, which is not something new, and sleep science. He does this thing called polyphasic sleep routine. He takes a lot of naps during the day instead of one long sleep to enhance his recovery. So I think, there's a lot of those sorts of consistent sports science techniques that he and his team implements. But again, someone that's such a high level athlete and, one of the greatest of all time, you probably find that he spends millions of dollars per year on therapy that he probably, there's probably a lot of elements of his therapy that he hasn't revealed to the world, that he keeps secret, just to make sure that he stays at the highest level, and that, maybe some of his competitors don't get access to that same information. And, for regular athletes around the world, if they're not in his financial position, they might be aware of certain sports science, elements that would, elongate their careers or, make them better athletes, but they might not be able to afford the same level of, one-on-one intensive therapy that someone like him or Tom Brady or LeBron James might have access to. But again, away from all of that, I think Cristiano Ronaldo is a very good example of, just kind of the old mentality where if you take care of yourself from day one and, you are able to be consistent, you can really elongate the effectiveness of your body. Look, I'm sure genetics also plays a part in it. I'm sure, this is another thing, a lot of high level athletes are born with, exceptional genetics. So, they were born to be stronger, fitter, faster. And, if they maintain that, they can, still perform at a higher level for a longer period. And, you might find that some of these high level athletes, even at the age of, 35, 36, 37, just because of their elite genetics, they might still be able to perform at a higher level than, your average 21, 22-year-old, So I'm sure, Cristiano Ronaldo at 38 was probably 10 times more of an athlete than I was probably even at like 19, for example, just from a genetic standpoint. But he is also, he's always made it very clear that, he doesn't drink, he doesn't abuse any substances, he doesn't stay out late, he doesn't party, he lives a very clean lifestyle.
Yeah.
I don't know if many other athletes are as disciplined as him, over the course of their lives in terms of, staying away from partying and drinking and that sort of thing. Tom Brady never really had a reputation of being a massive party animal, and Tom Brady didn't either. So I think When you look at these guys that are completely dedicated to their sports, and even Messi to a certain degree, I think of Messi, I don't think he prioritizes strength training and that sort of thing like Cristiano Ronaldo, but he's always been, from what I've heard from, coaches and his teammates, his only goal in life is to play football, and he doesn't seem to have many other distractions in his life. You never hear him, staying out until 4 o'clock in the morning or, stumbling out of a club drunk or anything like
Yeah.
that. So it's not just one thing, it's a combination of things.
Yes. I know NBA players like LeBron James would have, wine baths to ease their tiredness. And that's definitely something I want to try. All right, before we move on, here's a review of the biggest sports headlines in China and around the world for the past week. Chloe Kelly scored the winner in extra time as England pulled off a dramatic 2-1 comeback victory over Italy to reach the Women's European Championship final. England coach Serena Wiegman said she felt many emotions after the hard-fought win.
We know with the players we have in the squad, and if we change a bit and we bring more players up front, that we can always score a goal, because we've shown that multiple times, and we had to wait a little bit longer for it now, but at the end we did.
Spain's Aitana Bonmatí struck a superb extra-time winner to fire her side to a 1-0 victory over Germany in the other semi. Premier League champion Liverpool continued a big spending summer with the signing of striker Hugo Ekitike from Eintracht Frankfurt for an initial fee of £79 million. Ekitike is the fourth major signing of the summer for Onslaught's side, following the capture of Florian Wirtz and defenders Milos Kerkic and Jeremy Frimpong. Meantime, Barcelona confirmed the loan signing of England international forward Marcus Rashford from Manchester United. In golf, world number 1 Scotty Scheffler claimed his first Open Championship title with a dominant 4-shot victory at 17 under par at Royal Portrush, leading the American sweep of the podium.
It's a very special feeling. It takes a lot of work to get to this point in my career, and this was a tough week. It was challenging. The golf course was playing really tough, and I had to focus very hard over the course of the weekend.
Li Haotong made history as the first Chinese man to play in the final group at a major, sharing 4th place at 11 under alongside Matt Fitzpatrick and Wyndham Clark.
It's pretty good, and like I said, I didn't expect anything like this, but I'm super happy to finish top 4 and get in the Masters again, and I'm just looking forward to back there again.
Harris English finished the run-up at 13 under. Olympic champion Zheng Qinwen has withdrawn from the tennis US Open to recover from right elbow surgery. The world number 6 revealed lately that she had been dealing with persistent elbow pain affecting her training and matches. After trying various treatments, Zheng opted for arthroscopic surgery following advice from specialists. Chinese player Wu Yibing cruised past Gail Memphis 6-3, 6-1 at the City Open in his first main draw victory of the ATP Tour in 21 months following his foot surgery. He went on to beat Alexei Popyrin in 3 sets in the second round. 12-time All-Star Chris Paul is returning to the Los Angeles Clippers on a 1-year deal reportedly worth $3.6 million. The 40-year-old veteran enters his 21st NBA season, having previously played 6 years with the Clippers from 2011 to 17. Paul joins a retooled Clippers roster that recently added Bradley Beal, John Collins, and Brook Lopez in free agency. All right, welcome back. We talked about how old these players can maintain their competitive form in their careers. Apparently, now 30 is no longer an obvious threshold for these players. So with this new criteria, I think some of the players have retired too soon from their sports. So the first name popping into my mind, Philip Lahm. He retired at age of 33. He was still one of the best left backs in the world then, and he retired without any injury problems. I mean, he could have retired, like the age of 35, 36 at least. So, Tianyu, who do you think retired too early from their sports, besides those who were forced to retire due to injury problems?
Yeah, first name that comes to mind is definitely another former Bayern player, which is Toni Kroos.
Right.
I mean, even in his final season with Real Madrid, he's still delivering world-class performances. And just ask you will know, as a Bayern fan, you've got to remember that perfect pass he delivered to Vinicius Jr. in the Champions League semifinal.
Yeah, that hurts. Yeah.
Against Bayern Munich. I mean, that ball just literally split Bayern's defense line wide open, and it was a perfect proof that he has still had plenty left in the tank. But here's the thing. I think it's actually because he retired early in his career that just made his career feel so perfect. Because, you know, ending a high with a Champions League trophy at age 34 is definitely not a commonplace in football's history, because most players they don't have the right to choose their own way, how they walk off the pitch, but Cruz did, and he did it with style. If we're talking about contrast, look at Zidane. He also retired at 34 and also very early, but instead of getting a trophy at the end of his career, he ended his career with that infamous headbutt in the 2006 World Cup final. He had been playing brilliantly the whole tournament, and he could have led France to the final title, but his temper just got the better of him. That moment kind of overshadowed everything else.
Right. Brandon, any retiree that you think still can play in today's sports?
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of examples of athletes like you mentioned, Yang Guang, that had to step away, from the game due to injuries, and some of them also timed their kind of exits from the sport quite strangely. But there's also a couple of tennis players in particular that I think decided to walk away on a high note. Pete Sampras comes to mind. Stepping away from the game at 31. I mean, he was a brilliant player. And he also stepped away on a high note, and a lot of pundits felt like he could have gone on and potentially claimed 1 or 2 Grand Slams, but I think he was quite happy stepping away at a certain time. Ashley Barty, walked away also at a very young age and also cited personal fulfillment. Is it Nico Rosberg from Formula One also stepped away, after lifting his first championship, and I think he was also a great example of somebody that achieved his life goal and probably felt like maybe he couldn't maintain that high level of discipline and performance for many years, and is now a very successful pundit and seems to be enjoying life and living stress-free, whereas obviously being a full-time Formula One driver, the stress of competing at that level and trying to win titles, particularly after a season where you've become world champion, I think maybe that is just a stress that some athletes don't want to maintain for a long time, particularly if they've already made millions of dollars. So I guess there are some athletes around the world that feel like they could have played for a longer time, but they've achieved what they've wanted to achieve. They've made the money that they need to make, and now they just want to kind of sit back and enjoy life. So I don't personally have a problem with that. Of course, you also want to see as a fan, you want to see athletes really achieve the highest heights that they can, and be the best versions of themselves that they can be for as long as possible. But, sometimes that doesn't interest people. I mean, Neymar is also, quite a good example of that. Of course, he's still playing, don't get me wrong. And he's, still playing at a high level and, doing some, tricks and flicks at Santos and, playing with his hair and getting more tattoos and just enjoying life. In Brazil, he always, no matter what he's going through, he seems to just have a very happy, enjoyable lifestyle. I enjoy his social media pages. He seems like a interesting character, but he's also just somebody that says, look, I was born with this gift. I'm a great footballer, but I also enjoy life. I like to party. I like to spend time with my friends and family. I like to pretend that I'm injured to go back home for my sister's birthday like 10 years in a row. So, there's different types of personalities in sports. You do get some guys like Cristiano Ronaldo that's like robotic and just wants to be, the best possible and score as many goals as possible and lift as many titles as possible and not have any distractions and, go to sleep at 7 p.m. and eat chicken breasts and blah, blah, blah. But there's also some guys that are like, I'm born with this gift. I'm a millionaire. I can enjoy myself. And if I want to retire, I can. If I don't want to, I don't have to, And I think Venus Williams is not like a party animal or anything, but she also seems to have that mentality of I've been an incredibly successful athlete and I'm still feeling good. So I want to play. If I don't want to play, I'll step away.
Right. I don't know if it's a tradition or a culture thing, but it seems like German athletes tend to retire earlier than expected, like Rosberg, like Sebastian Vettel, like Toni Kroos, Lahm, Schweinsteiger, Khedira, like Mertesacker. They retired too soon, I think.
They want to enjoy their life.
Yeah, maybe they have small talk in the locker room and let's retire early. But talking about Philipp Lahm, one of the reasons he retired early, according to him, was making room for young athletes on the squad. I think it's a very noble reason.
Yeah.
So Tianyu, do you think the long careers of aged stars in sports will somehow bottleneck pathways for young players? Like in tennis, many aged stars would take many wild cards in one tournament.
Yeah, I think I do think there's a bit of a double-edged sword here, because still taking the example of Real Madrid, or over the past few seasons, the midfield has basically been dominated by the combination of Toni Kroos and Luka Modric. I mean, there's no doubt they have earned their trust from their coach, because they can bring world-class skill, experience, composure. But at the same time, it's hard to ignore that young talents like Tchouaméni and Camavinga, they kind of, haven't earned consistent minutes to grow and develop over these years. So when veterans stick around longer, it can sometimes, still slow down the natural transition process, and young talents might not get the game time they need to, just make mistakes, learn, and eventually lead the whole team. But, on the flip side, having those seasoned players around can be a huge advantage over time. Kroos and Modric have probably taught those young guys more than any textbook could, because whether it's reading the game, managing pressure, or just winning, whatever it takes to win at the highest level. So yeah, I think if more athletes to continue to play into their late 30s or 40s, it could bottleneck younger talents in some cases, but it also depends on how clubs manage the balance, whether it's letting veterans lead while still giving the young guys more playing time or more room to grow. So yeah, I think it's really about finding that mix of balance between stability and renewal.
Right. Let's see where Venus Williams' return will take her and how this will inspire young generation players, and what's the limit of aged players across different sports. With that, we end this episode of Sideline Story. Thank you so much for joining us. Subscribe to Sideline Story wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information, you can also check our website at radio.cgtn.com. Until next time, stay on the sidelines with us.